Okay, we're ready. Director of Poe Writer.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Saturday, March 12th, Saturday work session, and all board directors are present. And I'd like to go ahead and move forward with introducing Amy Cass from WASDA.
Thank you very much, President Poe Writer. I appreciate the opportunity to spend another morning with you all. Again, I'm going to share my screen here as well. Oh, actually, Dr. Herndon, I'm going to need a little help screen sharing here. But for today, first of all, I want to say thank you. You all have a practice of getting together, it seems to me, on a monthly basis, which I'm just never going to take for granted. So thank you for taking time out of your weekend to invest in your professional development. That is really amazing and unique. And so I'm just going to get used to hearing me say it, because I got to say it every time I see you on a Saturday morning. So here we are. And today, oh, here we go. Wonderful. Get my PowerPoint going. There we go. Perfect. Today, we are continuing a conversation we started in January, right when we started talking about some community agreements. And we're going to talk about a governance tool called board operating principles. Some districts, some school boards call them protocols, but we'll get into that and how that can be a helpful tool. But today, so we can kind of relax into our Saturday a little bit, I thought I'd do a not very serious kind of icebreaker in order to get us going here. So I'd like us all to think about what one of our superpowers are, and if there's a superpower we wish we had. And so while you think about that for a second, and I take a minute to organize my desktop so I get to see you all now that there we go. Now that my PowerPoint's up. So I'll start, and then I'm just going to go around my little Zoom box and ask you all if you have something to contribute. So one of my superpowers is I really love to solve puzzles. And so I like, whether it be a literal puzzle or perhaps, something in my own board service, if there's something that needs to be solved and something that needs to be optimized, I really love digging in and finding a way to get that done. And a superpower I wish I had, I have family, both my own kiddos and my sisters and all spread all over the country. I wish I had the whole Star Trek instant transport thing. I would love to be able to drop in, have a cup of coffee with my family, since we're so spread apart. That's the superpower I wish I had. But I'm just going to go around. If you want to pass, if you want to think a little longer, just let me know. I'm just going to go around my little box here, though. But Dave, do you have any ideas of something you can share about superpowers?
Sure. So something, yeah, I've always been kind of attracted to numbers and how we can use numbers to tell stories and that kind of stuff. So I spend a lot of time working with numbers and trying to extract meaning out of numbers and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of my superpower, I guess. The one I wish I had better was the ability to communicate those stories better. That's something I always work on and try and get better at. But anyway, that's for me.
Oh, great. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Edna, do you have any you can share?
I'm trying to decide my superpower, but for a superpower that I would like to have is I would really like to be able to communicate better. And I would really like to be able to cook anything. But I'll think on my superpower.
Thanks, Edna. Dr. Herndon, do you have any you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that I do I can absorb a lot. So, and sometimes that can feel overwhelming to a lot of people, but, I can absorb a lot of things that come my way, both physical, emotional, educational. And the power that I wish I had, I really wish I had much better sight. Like, I've had to wear glasses for quite some time, and I wish I could see super far and super clear. Just because, as we were talking before, you know, we live in such a beautiful area. I would just love to be able to see everything, like up in the mountains and down through the ocean, all of that just crystal clear. Because it's just, you know, I just find nature just so overwhelmingly beautiful. I just want to be able to take it all in and see it crystal clear.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Bridget, do you have any you can share?
What a fun question and thing to think about on a Saturday morning. So thank you, Amy, for creating this space. I am from family lineage in the Philippines who are Ilocano, and my last name Agpawa was Americanized to Apoa, but Agpawa is a rare last name, and there is a lineage of spiritual healers in the Philippines that are known. So when I come across folks in the from the Philippines, they'll ask if I'm related to the Agpawas, right? So I would say that a superpower I have is the healing arts. So like through education and teaching and training human service professionals, and then also as a mental health therapist, amazing ability to help people go through crisis and be able to grow and find their way. And so that's what my superpower is. And then what I wish I had was a freeze time machine. So I could, or actually a time machine so I can go back, because my kids have grown up so fast that I wish I could, go back and have more opportunities to spend time with them, and freeze time at times because they're getting older all the time.
I can totally relate to that one. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. And Jan.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks. I think one of my superpowers is that I can see the good or the possibility in all people. And what I would love to have is, some of you probably don't remember, but there's a cartoon character named Inspector Gadget. And he has his limbs let him do anything. And I want to be able to reach across the country, like you said, Amy. I want to reach across the country to my grandkids, but I also want to reach out and help wherever it's needed. So there's just this desire to reach farther for some reason. That would be my superpower that I would want.
Oh,
Thanks
that's
for
wonderful.
asking.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. That's great. And Carly, what superpowers are on your mind?
So I started with one and then changed it kind of midway through. But I think something that I'm really good at is taking in lots of pieces of information and translating it in a way that makes it digestible for a lot of different folks to understand, and in a way that it kind of that people can relate to. So concise, like making content more concise or things more concise, and which I think then flows into helping people like feel seen and heard. And that they belong. I think that's a superpower of mine. And a superpower I wish I had, I'm not sure how much of a superpower it is, but just something I really want is just the ability to be more present and relaxed. Whatever that looks like, just be present and relaxed, because I'm always all over the place.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Oh, that's wonderful. This is a great reflection, right? This is one of my favorites. And Edna, I saw you unmute. So do you have an idea for your superpower?
I did think of one. I think that I am very comfortable working with young children and helping them learn and discover the world and themselves.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah. So today, just as our top level agenda, if you remember some of the work we've done before, we focused a lot on the what of school board service. So board roles and responsibilities, how that interacts with your specific work as a school board. And we've touched a little bit on the how, right? When we talked about community agreements in January, in terms of it's not just the what of what a school board does, but how a school board does the work that actually contributes to positive student outcomes in a district. And so we're going to start with just a little grounding as in terms of why it's important and the findings behind that. It's a little intuitive that it would make some sense, but there's actually some research behind it, which is the article study we're going to kick off with. And then we're going to actually dive into taking a stab at updating the operating principles that Tukwila School District has that haven't been updated for a while, and practice using that as a tool to support your work as a board. So again, and we've talked about this before, excuse me, I'm going to, because this is a little technical in terms of content, I'm going to be a little more structured. I'm not just going to go randomly around my Zoom screen. I'm going to be a little more structured in terms of getting input from you all, because I want to make sure we hear from everyone and incorporate it in a systematic way. But that also still means if you need more time to process, like, thank you, Edna, for modeling that for us. If you need a little more time to think, you just let us know, and we'll absolutely be flexible. This is, again, a pretty technical work. We will be taking a break so we can stand up and take a little mental and physical stretch. But if you need to take care of your own needs, feel free to step away for a sec if you need to.
Amy,
So,
before we begin, can I have someone explain to me exactly what a courageous conversation is?
In what context, Edna?
Well, I keep hearing that we need to have courageous conversations, and I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Okay, well, that's a good question. Communication styles and structures around it are something that's actually covered within board operating principles. And so that could be an area that we can dive into when we get into that. Courageous conversations, there's sometimes you see it with capitalized C, sometimes you see it with lowercase c. There are some protocols, and I could pull out the book about courageous conversations from Singleton in terms of there is a professional development for educators around courageous conversations around issues of race. But then there's the lowercase c in terms of how for a group of people to have a conversation with honesty, but in a way that promotes growth and understanding by having, it means different things to different people. And so thank you for the question. I've made a note about it, but that's a good context to use when we're going through the principles. Okay, any other questions before we go on? Okay, great. So what we're going to start here with is Deb helped me send an article to you, and the Science of Student Achievement, I just wanted to provide a little context for you, is part of an article series from the Texas Association of School Boards. There's a gentleman who I bet you Dave has met, or if y'all have bumped around the circles a little bit, Phil Gore, who used to work for WASDA, moved down to Texas and started working for the Texas Association of School Boards. And the work that was done in Washington State, he was very involved with in terms of developing the school board standards and the board self-assessment tool that y'all are familiar with. And there's been research. So since the standards have been around since around 2000, 2002. There's been research that's been done looking at how boards rate themselves complying with the standards and then growth of student outcomes in their district. And so Phil took this research with him to Texas. So that's why, hence the Texas hook. And there's a series of 4 articles, but in the interest of time today, I'm only going to ask us to look at one. And I thought this one was the most pertinent, about the science of student achievement. And how the what and the how of board work, boardmanship, and then governance of a district as a team, what practices and behaviors positively affect school or student outcomes. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to take about 5 minutes here. So hopefully you've had time to pre-read. I'd like you just to go through and look for the how. So the what, like I said, the what we've talked about before. I want you to look for the how and find 3 to 5 practices, habits, behaviors mentioned that are shown to support student success. And then we're going to share them together as a little grounding before we dive into some principles. So I'm going to mute myself and I'll call you all back. If you get done a little early, feel free to do a thumbs up, but I'll give you all about 5 minutes.
Amy? Amy?
Yeah.
How do I get into that? I'm so sorry.
Were you able to get the article?
I can't even, I just have the 4 books there. I don't have,
You don't have the article? Okay, hold on. I'll get you a link.
think.
It was in an email from Deb. It's not it's not off of the screen. You got to go
Oh,
back
okay.
to the email from Deb.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you for that clarification, Jen. And if you can't find it, Edna, let me know.
It'll be a minute.
I can post the link right now in the chat for you, so you can go right there.
Thank you.
Are you able to get it, Edna?
Yes, thank you very much, Bridget.
All right, does anyone need some more time? Okay, and it looks like Enna might have been having some technical difficulties because I don't see her on right now, but I'm sure she'll rejoin us here as soon as she can. So I've
I
pulled
just
up.
noticed her in the attendees list, so I wonder if she sees to get promoted again. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much.
You should be back in.
Thanks, Flip.
Yeah.
All right, are you doing okay there, Edna? Are you ready to
You
keep
know,
going?
It's a generational thing.
Oh,
This
no.
tech-
It is, I have to say something, virtual, you should see my desk right now. I have a second monitor, like trying to balance all the open documents and all. It's doing this virtually can be a challenge. So it's not necessarily just this generational thing. Yeah. Yeah. This can be a lot. So.
I have one screen and I can't seem to handle that. So thank you.
All right. Well, so what we're going to just talk about this quickly. Again, this isn't the crux of our work today. This is just taking the 30,000 foot view to kind of get our mindset before we dive into the work. So what we're going to do is what's called an inclusive discussion protocol. So what this helps with, again, this is what I was talking about. Instead of me just going around my little blocks, this is to make sure we balance discussion. We always start with different people because we're going to be doing a lot of discussion today. So you'll see this list. I just went through your director areas and put them in, and then put Flip at the bottom because I'd love to hear, this is a governance team conversation a lot today. So we made sure to have 6 people, not just 5. And so what you'll see is I'll mix up the order, and I've just pre-dumped it in again to make sure I don't inadvertently miss someone's voice or do the same order over and over again. So we're going to start, we're just going to do numerical order this time. So Carly, what are a couple things that you found in the article? Some behaviors, practices that boards can do to help support student achievement.
Yeah, so there are four things that kind of really stuck out to me. So one was ensuring that the board is accountable to the public. And there was a little bit more to that, but that was just the snippet.
Mm-hmm.
If you need more, I can find it. But yeah, so ensuring that the board is accountable to the public, creating and operating off of a clear and shared purpose. Collaborating with staff in the community, and more specifically, gathering input from a wide spectrum of folks within the community to ensure that we're getting voices that represent the entire community. And then create and clearly communicate expectations for the superintendent.
Great, thank you. So then we'll go down the list or numerical order. Jan, do you have, if you found similar items, go ahead and just quickly review them because it's kind of interesting to see what threads everyone pulled together. But if you have something new to add to the list, just let me know.
Yeah, thanks. The one thing I would add to the list is the whole idea that student achievement scores are the ultimate measure of success. That's the premise of this document and this work. And I don't know if I agree with the premise or if I know enough to agree with that premise. But I do agree with the things that we should be doing, like accountability, communicating high expectations, working off a continuously evolving plan, doing our business in fair, respectful, and responsible manner, engaging the community, and having a clear and shared purpose.
Thank you, Jen. And that is interesting. You know, this is what can be tricky about doing a research project like this is you have to find something. Well, one way to do it is to find something that is very quantifiable, which would be test scores, right? And we know there are other metrics of students' achievements and outcomes and what people might call success. And so, but this is just one that these researchers decided to use. So, but yes, there's obvious limitations for that, but thank you for that summary. And so, Bridget, do you have anything to add? And you're a little quiet for some reason, Bridget.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So the articulate the convention that all students can learn by adopting policies and taking actions, communicating expectations for all students, and foster a culture of collaboration and shared purpose and improving student achievement. I guess what stood out for that one is if there are going to be goals or expectations, what as a district do we have clear goals and plans to have students meet those goals? So that is something that really stood out to me because in service, it hasn't been so clear. Like even if there are goals, you know, what are we doing differently so that those goals are met? And instead of putting it on the students, if you will, if the right supports aren't in place or if there's something that isn't happening in the district. So that's one thing. And then the let's see, there was one with adopt and monitor. Oh, where is it? Proven. Okay, sure. I have a couple others here on my piece of paper. District accountability, meeting learning expectations, and then community engagement.
Mhm.
Those were the things that stood out for me.
That's great. And what good timing for you to think about the actual implementation plan around setting high expectations and goals for your students as you're getting ready, as you've actually embarked on a strategic goal and plan process. Very timely thought around that. So thank you for sharing. Edna, have you had enough time to pull out a thought or two from the article?
I'm going to wait because I'm trying to really hear what these wonderful people are saying. So I'm going to pass for right now, but I look forward to you coming back.
I will come back then. All right. So then Dave.
So I think most of these have probably been covered, but evaluating the superintendent, committing to continuous improvement plan, which includes, of course, developing what that plan is, engaging the local community, working effectively and collaborating as a school board, and creating district conditions for student and staff success. Those are the ones I had.
And what do you think, creating the conditions for student and staff success, any thoughts? That's honestly, that's one of my favorite definitions for school board service. But do you have any thoughts in terms of what areas might be really pertinent to Tukwila?
Well, one that we always go through every year is the budget. So, where you put the resources has a lot to do with, the conditions that are in place. It also, that's another one that also has a lot to do with listening to community and students and staff to collect. A lot of times we can kind of make decisions about what we think is creating conditions for success, but without getting a broad range of input from other people, and particularly the students that are experiencing I always think of them as the customers, and so how they look at it and what's working for them is really key to that.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that. And Flip, do you have any thoughts? Anything that popped out for you from the article as a superintendent?
No, most of these I would agree have been there. The one that I always think about is the sixth one, which is just kind of working as a team, and then in the additional areas about, for me, I think just working with school boards, it's the individual growth as well as the team growth. So the continuous improvement and wanting to support that piece.
Thank you for pointing that out. The various levels of professional development, right? And both are important. So thank you. And so
everyone covered it so well, but I kind of focused on the student and staff successes. I think that we don't often take advantage of doing that.
And what
the staff showing respect, sharing the successes of the staff, which is something I think with our new communications director we can change.
Okay, all right, I see what you mean. Thank you. Yeah, celebrating that, right? Because it's a stressful business we're in. Sometimes we inadvertently focus on areas of growth a lot and not where we've already met the mark in places. That's a great point. Thank you. So I was taking some quick notes and I highlighted some things that really fall within the how. So having practices for the board to be clearly accountable to the public, operating with a shared purpose, collaborating with staff and the community in a wide spectrum of the community, all the communities within Tukwila, creating and clearly communicating expectations. That can be little what, but also how, right? That can be a core principle of doing that, working effectively and collaboratively as a board and as I would say a governance team, the 6 of you, that would be really important. So those are kind of some of the how areas that operating principles can really help reinforce. Any other thoughts before we move on? Yeah, Carly.
One quick thought that I just wrote down, and it kind of goes back to what Jan mentioned earlier. And I think I really struggle with the achievement piece as well, and understanding that like achievement can't come without belonging. And I think one of our, I don't know, whether it's an area of focus or how we figure out how to do this, but like ultimately we have to create an environment where young people are feeling connected and where staff are honoring and respecting the identities of individuals, because right now throughout our district, that's not happening. And before we even think about test scores and achievement, we have to think about that belonging piece.
You know, that's such an important point, Carly. Thank you for pointing it out. And this is the book, I'm sorry, it stays on my desk all the time, that I brought up right last time I was with you in January. And if you haven't had a sense to get it, Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity, and actually it focuses kind of on the building level. You have to pull out the themes really for it to be, define things that are directly applicable to school boards. But actually this is a book that's being used to develop the WASDA's equity program, right? Because it's true, you know, even if you think about Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, right? Like you can't really achieve unless you have the first a feeling of belonging in your community. So thank you for pointing that out, Carly. But
that visual that's in that book, I love that book. I think everyone on this board should read it. That visual in the stepping stones was really impactful for me, because it showed that achievement before the belonging and just that huge like leap that we're expecting everybody to make. Anyway, that visual was really eye-opening for me.
I agree with that. And we don't have data points on that. So it's really hard to measure. I don't think it's impossible to measure, but it's not something we have measured. I love that book. So yeah, I agree, Carly. Thanks.
No, and yeah, thank you for thinking about that, because that's something to think about too in terms of your work together as a board, you know, at the top of the organization, you know, finding, you know, ways to create a culture of dignity. And there are some actionable steps in this book, right? This is, it is something that can be measured certainly on a district-wide basis. There are ways to do it. And it's something to think about. If it's something you want to permeate throughout the organization, at the top is a good place to start.
Something we need to practice.
Yeah. And there are ways to practice it, for sure. So, you know, in fact, you know, something to put in your mental brain, since again, you all are so devoted to continuing your professional development. This book is set up with discussion questions at the end. Some school boards do a book study on it and do a chapter a month and then discuss the chapter with them amongst themselves. Like it just makes for a natural book study the way it's written. And since that gives you discussion questions at the end of each chapter. So just something for y'all to think about. You have a lot on your plate. I don't want to make you feel any more pressure, but if you wanted to, it's kind of ready to go.
So curiosity about that, Amy, do they do that in the context of a board meeting, or is it a special?
It's kind of like this. It's a separate session usually, so you can have a conversation around it. And there's not any work where it's you'd want to have the ability to vote, for instance, right? It's from a professional development standpoint.
But it would have to be noted as a public meeting? So that all of, okay.
Yeah, yeah, because you would have the quorum present.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and I mean, definitely, obviously you can read it as individuals, but if you wanted to have a book study conversation amongst yourself, especially when you get towards the middle and end of the book, there's some specific suggestions and practices that you can do to support the culture. And so it's something you would have to do in a public meeting if you want to do it together. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, great. So now we're going to start getting into the technical work here. As a governance tool, operating principles serve a couple purposes. So first of all, they articulate agreed upon governance team agreements. And the idea here is not that it's not a worship of the written word situation. You don't want to get too into the weeds with these principles, but the idea is by forming them and then discussing them, and especially a lot of boards have a practice of reviewing them every year. It helps create common understanding around those agreements and have a reference document. It's a reference document for the agreements. It's not necessarily the agreement itself, if that makes sense, right? It also provides clarification through those conversations. You can reduce misunderstanding and therefore streamline work. So if you have your communication, again, protocols down, it can help you streamline the work instead of having to stop and figure out the process instead of just going right into the work. And this is why, Flip, I've brought you into the conversation a couple times, because a lot of the protocols involve not just the board, but interactions with the superintendent, with the governance team. And by providing rules of the road, if you think, I use the traffic analogy a lot. So if you think about if you were trying to drive around Tukwila and no one understood what a stop sign meant, no one understood what a stoplight meant, or how to yield or how to merge, obviously it would take a lot longer to drive through town. But if everyone understands what the rules of the road are, it can make for a lot easier getting from point A to point B. And that's what operating principles can do for a board. And what's interesting is there are, just like any culture, right? There are often operating principles that you are already practicing. They just haven't been, documented on the agreement. So it's not that every single action or process that a board does needs to get redesigned. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to document what is getting done and then find those areas that do need some more clarification that perhaps might be making some bumps in the road to help you streamline your work. Any questions before I keep going? Okay.
All right, just a note.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you use the traffic analogy. I use it all the time. But I realized that in Tukwila, we have so many cultures that come together with so many different driving experiences that, to me, there are times where you help other people in that situation, not necessarily to conform to your rules of the road, but to figure out how to honor where they come from. That's not a good use of that word, but I think of crosswalks. Crosswalks are like a local invention, and we have people that cross wherever they want, and we could yell at them and say cross in the crosswalk, or we can say, yeah, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and we'll be really careful. So I think, I just want to make sure that we're not making our rules of the road that everyone else has to abide by, and that our rules of the road are flexible enough for everyone to belong, like Carly said. Now, I don't know if that made any sense to anybody, but it did to me.
Well, I think the context of what rules we're talking about is a really important point, Jan.
Okay.
So this is not, we're not talking about, this is a unique policy in that it only applies to the work of the governance team. So that's why you take time to discuss it amongst yourselves. So, to continue the traffic analogy, it would be one thing to hand a school board and say, okay, this is what, I don't know, some national organization has decided this is the best way for a school board. You have to do it this way. It has to be this way. That's not the point. The point is to find what works for this governance team. And that's one reason why it's suggested you review it every year, because as circumstances change, you might need to adjust them. As team members change, you might need to adjust them. It's all about the conversation. And understanding, again, that idea that if this governance team is working collaboratively together towards a shared purpose of serving the students in your community, then it can help the wheels of the district move better. And therefore, people are spending, and it can create a lot of disruption amongst staff if the school board, and it's not just about communication protocols, but this, if a school board doesn't know what to do in terms of when, even, if a local reporter calls up the school board and wants to quote, if all of a sudden everyone has to ground everything to a halt to support the school board to answer this question, that's work for time they're not devoted to work to students.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a time that we consider supporting an example of supporting each other where they are and making that journey of learning. It's a perfect time for the board to do that.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And again, these aren't meant to be written, in granite. They're meant to be flexible and to be a support. This is a governance tool, just like a planning calendar for a board can be really helpful, right? As a planning calendar can help you understand, okay, when am I doing the budget? When are we going to be reviewing strategic goals? And so the board understands exactly how to frame the work. This is another tool to support the work, not to become the work itself. So here's the thought. So now's when we're going to think about those 5 examples of other school boards operating principles. So here's the idea, is that we're going to use those as examples to think about the possibilities of what could be in an operating principle. And then we're going to come back to what is already written for Tukwillas and weave in some ideas we might have gotten from other people's examples to see if there's any areas perhaps we want to add, any clarifications we want to make, but it can be helpful to learn from others. And so what I'm going to do is, if we were together, I would pair you all up and have you sit down and chat, but it's a little tricky here on Zoom. So I have a way where I'm going to ask you to just pick 2, and I'm going to assign you which 2. And I'm going to have some prompt questions for you to study and pull some information out. So first, what I'm going to do is let you know which ones I'm asking you to study. And then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to ask you to actually do. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So there are 5 school districts that I pulled these from, and there's 6 of you. So I should have thought, I'm like, okay, I should have done an even number. So the idea is I didn't want you all to have to study all 5. That's too much. But it can be helpful to compare one to another. So I didn't want you just studying one either. So I've asked you, and there's going to be some overlapping because, again, if you were together, I would be putting you side by side so you can discuss. So we're going to kind of do that together. So I'm going to ask you, so Carly, so the 1220P, the one that's at the top, this is a procedure in their actual policy manual. That's from Kelso. I'm going to ask you, Carly, to look at Kelso's and Auburn's, and Jan the same. I'm going to ask you to look at Kelso and Auburn's. Bridget, I'm going to ask you to look at Riverview's, which is their procedure is P1110-P, and then Tacoma's. And Edna, I'm going to ask you to do the same. So it's Riverview and Tacoma's. And then Dave, I'm asking you to look at North Shores and Riverview's. And Flip, I'm going to ask you to look at North Shores and Kelso's. So we're going to have some overlap. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to, again, show you the prompt questions in a second. So I'm going to ask you to do, and they're kind of specific. I'm going to give you 10, 15 minutes to do it. So we're going to really dive into these 2 examples, and then we're going to go through the examples one by one. So then we can have a little collaborative work from the people who have studied them. And then I'm going to be taking copious notes. You'll see. Making sense? All right. So this is what we're going to look for. So first of all, you'll see that they're organized in different formats. And again, this is why I wanted you to have 2 to compare and contrast. So if there's, again, there's no right or wrong. Is there a format that you think would work well for your team or another? I want you to look at the categories. Some actually have listed categories. Some are kind of implied. So, how many categories would be helpful? Which categories do you think are really applicable to the Tukwila team? And then again, from the category level down into specific topics. What topics are items that would really support your team? And even if you don't want to copy the exact language, because again, we want it fitting you all, if there's language in there that really resonates with you, highlight it. let's grab it. We can totally borrow from everyone's examples. And see, this is what is number 5 is the ones I'm thinking is going to take some time. I also suggested that you have handy the PSESD relationship and partnership framework. This is our little bonus question here. If we can find examples of principles and protocols from other districts that support the work of the relationship and partnership framework, we want to be very conscious about identifying those. This is not, applying an equity lens to this process is not something that's often intentionally done in districts. But I think because of all the work you've done with Eileen and Matthew, in fact, I chatted with Matthew about this yesterday, just to make sure we were on the right page. But all this time you've invested with Matthew and Eileen, I mean, I think this would be a really great add for your principals. And then what I'm going to do is I want you to highlight anything you want to use, but I want to pull out themes. So I'm just going to ask you to identify your top 3 that you really want to make sure would get, if there's items in these 2 that you're studying, if there's 3 you really want to prioritize to make sure it gets incorporated in some form into the Tukwila version, we want to make sure we identify those really important ones, because there'll be a lot of detail that we'll get lost in. So is this making sense? Check in. Okay. So again, this is a lot of work. I'm going to check in 10 minutes and see if you need more time. Okay. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, so I'm inclined to give you 5 minutes more. But if you finish up before then, feel free to hop back on. We can always wrap this up earlier if we need. And one of my copies got all messed up. I had to grab it off my printer. I'll be right back. All right. So Carly, how's it going for you?
It's going fine.
Do you need a few more minutes?
That's okay. I can,
Are you sure?
yes, that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. So
Okay.
I'm going to go back to the list. And actually, we're going to do that. We're going to do it this way. So what I'd like to do is we're going to do this by the actual document. At first, I was going to go through and have people report out, but I think it's easier for people who have studied the protocol to share their thoughts instead of going through by person order. So we're going to look at Kelso first. So this is Carly and Jan and Flip. And I'm going to start with, I'll start with Carly. So in terms of, first of all, your thoughts on all the prompts, which categories seemed right, if there's something in the language that resonated with you, if there are options in here that you think supports the relationship and teamwork framework, go ahead and kick us off, Carly.
Okay. So as far as like formatting goes, and is it okay if I compare it to the other one?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I prefer the bullet point format. However, I appreciate the larger categories in the other one that we had, but I think the paragraph format can get a little bit muddy and lack some clarity. And so the bullet points, I think, are just much more clear and concise. Though I do think, again, putting them under like an umbrella category could be beneficial.
Okay.
As far as, I'm sorry, would you mind going back to those questions really quickly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wrong way. There we go.
Okay. I don't necessarily know how many categories feel right. So I don't know about that. What topics would be most helpful for the team? And this kind of goes hand in hand, I think, with number 6 as well. There was a line in there, and it also correlates with that number 5, what supports the relationship and partnership framework, this idea of encouraging constructive disagreement. I loved the fact that it actually used the word disagreement as a way of like normalizing discomfort, normalizing these other things that we often shy away from. And that, of course, I think fits into the relationship partnership framework. I had that up just a second ago. Hold on. Yeah.
And do you mind, Carly, helping me find which bullet point that one is in Kelsos?
Yes.
Because I'm going to highlight it.
The second to last on the first page. And it's the
Thank
last
you.
3 words.
Yeah, here we go. Thank you.
Yeah. Accountability, I think, was a kind of an overarching topic, or I guess a category. Now that I said I didn't have one, that I think is really important, not just to each other, but accountability to community, and what that looks like. Other language that feels applicable. Oh, the idea of being leading by example, but which I think is really important. I think the caveat and the thing that we really need to grapple with and figure out is what example are we leading? Are we leading with, right? And so it's great to lead by example if we're modeling healthy and effective ways of courageous conversations, accountability, and conflict resolution. So if we're not doing that and we're leading by example, but leading down a not so inclusive and equitable path, then leading by example is not helpful.
Okay.
I think that's all I have for now. I might have something else to add later if that's okay.
Okay, so if you were to have a top 3, and it's okay, this is not, we can be flexible with this, but if there were 3 that you'd want to make sure, I mean, we talked about the second from the bottom on the first page. Are there any 2 you'd want to make sure we capture as elements in the Tukwila?
Sorry, no, not on this one. I mean, obviously there are a lot
That's
of
fine.
things on here that I think are good, but yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You look like you're reading. So are you ready to move on? I was going to ask for Jan's input next. Are you good?
Let's do the, okay, so this one, the board encourages communication from community, parents, staff, and students. That is bullet point number 4.
Yes, got it.
And I guess bullet point number 2, I'll go with that one. I think the reason why I didn't say that one initially is I have some concerns with the word respect. If it's not, again, fleshed out and really talked about what that looks like, feels like, sounds like. So the sentiment and the idea behind bullet point number 2, I love, but with some wordsmithing.
Okay.
And clarification.
Thank you. Okay, great. So Jan, you had this one also.
Yes, I did. And as far as the format, I follow along what Carly said. I like the bullet points, the short phrases better than the paragraphs, but I do like the headings.
Great.
So if we can put bullet points under headings, I think that'd be great. And I would say 5 or 6 headings. There were some things that I think could go together under one heading, like the authority and the strategic direction, because the authority comes out of, or what we're authorized to do aligns with moving this strategic direction forward, that kind of thing. So I think one of the things that's really important is the opening statement. It sets who we are and what our purpose is. And I would also wonder if it would be appropriate to put in, and I don't see this on any of them, I don't think, is that we're elected officials and we're responsible to the community who elected us. And if that, I don't know how that would play in there, but it is different than being hired or being even, brought on by whatever other method. So I would put something about that in the opening statement. The ones that I liked were it was really about how we work together. And once again, that goes back to the belonging book, how we work together. So I put the first and second with some real deep discussion about what that means. And then I also put that second to the bottom one about constructive disagreement. Let's see, I think that's what I would offer at this point.
Super helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that, Jan. And Flip, do you have any thoughts about, the categories or which topics kind of rose to the top for you, especially with the PSESD equity work?
I think as we're just looking at a lot of these, I agree with many of the sentiments. I appreciate, especially in the Kelso one, number 4, which is encouraging the communication between community parents, staff, and students. And then just to make sure that I know about that, the other one, we haven't had to deal with this too much, although we have in the past, is just, especially if there are issues that become like media issues, to be aware that the superintendent board president will probably be the ones communicating with media, just because that makes for a consistent message that goes out. It goes back to a couple of the other pieces where, the board is an entity of 5 elected individuals. So it's in several of these that, no one board member really can take that unilateral action. So by communicating and understanding what the message is going to be, I think that's especially key for those really big issues. Like I said, we haven't had a few of those for a while. We have in the past, obviously, those things do arise. And I think it also actually helps protect each of the board members individually as well, because then they're not having to think about a response to any of those pieces. So I think that's helpful. And then just also the importance about, when we're having the individual, or when we're having meetings, just trying not to debate. I appreciate what was said previously, though. So how to have the discussions, especially amongst or between board members, that is constructive disagreement as opposed to debating the issue. So what's the best way to go about that without it appearing that it's too divisive? So I agree with the wordsmithing, like how do you get to that point to have that kind of environment so that you can have really important conversations that respect the individual differences that board members bring, but that are ultimately end up being informative in the dialogue about policies or how things are being impacted by impacting the school district or the community. So it can be tricky, especially when people are very passionate about the topics that they're talking about. So yeah, and I think those are things that we practice. So then when I think about the PSESD work that we do, it's, how do we practice these things, both individually and kind of collectively as a group.
That's a really good point, Flip. And there is a difference between debate and deliberating. So, it's a unique thing that a school board has both, as a governing body, an elected body, both executive responsibilities and legislative responsibilities. And that's why the debate versus deliberating skill can really be an important skill to hone. What's your question, Carly?
We're just kind of an addition to what something Dr. Herndon just said, particularly around when people are passionate, and also like the appearance. Like I want to be mindful about just because someone potentially in the community perhaps perceives or hears a dialogue happening between the board that maybe makes them feel a certain way, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a tense or whatever type of, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's disagreement going on. And
Right.
Being a person that is a very passionate human about a lot of things, and I know when I get passionate, I get hyped, and that doesn't, like, that's not any more than just me being passionate. But a lot of people perceive that as me getting disagreeable, or me, creating a tense a space or something. And so I just want to be mindful about recognizing and honoring individual personalities and communication styles, and that not everything that could be perceived as disagreeable actually is disagreeable. And so how do we really navigate that and get to the point where we really are understanding and navigating and honoring, again, individuals?
Yeah, and that is, Flip just gave a thumbs up in chat. No, that's a really good point. And I'd like to bring two thoughts to that. Actually, I'm going to do three. So if you look, I have up on my many monitors here, I have the framework open. And one of the areas of healing is valuing differences. Okay, so moving from having only one right way to do it and valuing differences. So one way to model that when you're doing deliberations as a board, if you're debating, I'm going to just pick on math curriculum. If you're debating, which math curriculum to adopt, and say, I have just spoken about my firm belief that I think this is the right thing we need to do. And then Carly, you could say, thank you. You can, there's a point of valuing the previous speaker before you add your own. And it can be a communicative effort in order to build the conversation instead of having it just be a binary conversation. So Carly, you could say, Amy, thank you so much for your contributions. I can tell that you are very passionate about this. And I'm so glad that we have board members that are really involved in helping the community. Here's my aspect. Here's my point of view. Here's my experience. I'd like to add to the conversation. So, and I've noticed, who's really good at doing this? Our high school students. Our high school students have been coached really well by our teachers in how to have these deliberations, right? Not just debates, in terms of in a way that adds cumulative value to the conversation. So that might be a practice that you work on, that helps value the other person's difference as a way, instead of just having it be binary either or. It has to either be this answer or this answer. Maybe it's all the answers.
I would also say, just to kind of add on to that, I think the more people become familiar with the personalities of individuals, like they also get to know that particular person and know that that's, kind of the way in which they interact with other folks. Again, it's not a negative necessarily. It's just getting to know how individuals themselves kind of show their personalities and who they are, and especially the way in which they follow up with other people. So it could be a really passionate piece, and then if someone feels that it may not have come across as being like really attacking, but if somebody is taking offense to that, and then it's following up like, no, that's not the intent at all. I just get, kind of passionate about this, and So I think how we continue to interact with that, and as Director Who was saying, if you're in a meeting and an observer might think, whoa, this is really tense. But as individual board members, we don't really feel that it's that tense. How we respond to that kind of interaction and communication really can help send the signal that, no, it's okay. It's, people are showing their individuality, and that's all right. The way in which we are personally responding to that is not one in which is signaling this is a super tense situation.
And I'd like to just point out that conflict in and of itself is not a bad thing. Conflict is necessary to make progress. Certainly when there's injustice in the world, conflict is necessary. It's how to have it productively. It's how to process it as a group before it escalates, right? How to find creative, constructive ways to contain the conflict so it doesn't escalate. So, but there's a reason there's 5 individuals. There's a history of school boards in our nation, right? Because you need different points of view. You need different life experiences to come to the best solution. That's going to involve conflict, right? And so I think that's what you were just saying, Dr. Herndon, in terms of as modeling at the top of the organization, having conflict in and of itself is not bad. It's how you can wrap up the conversation, respect each other through it, validate each other, right? Again, valuing the differences amongst each other. Okay, that was a great conversation, by the way. Any other thoughts about Kelso? So I'm going to go back here to the list. So I'm going to not make those same people talk again. We're going to hop to Riverview. So Bridget, if you want to kick us off, and I'm going to go back to the prompts for Riverview. What were your takeaways?
I just put notes in the chat of, so I had a chance on Friday, I went through all of these, and they're, kind of recognizing that there's different elements in each of these that are really interesting. In terms of Riverview, something that stood, did I put Kelso down? Anyway, I did review, was it Riverview? I think I might've put Kelso on accident. Anyways, it was adopted in 2006. Which means that the revisions or adaptions, unless this is an older version, hasn't been touched for 16 years. So that stood out to me. It makes me wonder, so like in terms of how often, and and thinking about where we're at too, right? And our need to revisit on an annual basis, if that is sort of a WASDA recommendation, healthy organizational development. And then what I did was I used the transformational relationships and education, and really just went through it thinking about kind of the status quo versus what is in there that's transformative. And so in that one, it was only one right way, worship of the written word, virtue of thought and linear thinking, perfectionism and the right to comfort, conflict avoidance, and sort of maintaining the status quo. So that was kind of what stood out in that one. And then transformative elements or aspects was the quality and relationship to quantity and collaboration. So those were the 2 vibes that stood out. And then with Tacoma, I didn't
do me a favor, Bridget. We're just going to do one at a time. So let's just do Riverview real quick. Yeah, we'll get everyone's Riverview, and then we'll hop on to Tacoma.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much. So in terms of, and we're going to think about this from an additive process. So are there any elements of the Riverview, right, that you say that did support the framework that you would like to make sure these elements or even just thoughts, right, are captured in a Tukwila version?
I like the number 7, the superintendent is the chief executive officer, and their opinion will be sought and utilized on matters. The board will carefully consider these recommendations from them before making decisions.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, because I love how the elements that you pulled out of the, moving from status quo to transformation. Like you did pick on some things it's not very strong in, but the elements that it is, the elements where it is strong. Is there anything else from here that you would want to pull forward?
No.
Okay, thank you. So then I think, let me make sure this is what happens when I'm managing screens. So Edna.
Yes. It wasn't a very dynamic rule of conduct. I did like the debating of the issues, not one another, and to avoid word and action that cast a negative impression on another board member, superintendent, or any other individual. I did kind of glom onto that because that's always a concern for me, that when we are debating or having a conversation about an issue, it needs to be the issue. And I wasn't impressed with the format of this. So
Thank you. And specifically, it is a different format. It doesn't have like the category header with bullets, correct? It's just some linear items, but any
it has a category heading.
Yeah. Okay.
Am I looking at the right one? Riverview?
Yeah, Riverview. So the P1110-1. And something I want to point out. So it was adopted in 2006. I believe they do revise it. I don't know if it's annual, but there have been revisions. But it is pretty succinct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other takeaways from this one, Edda?
Not really.
Okay. All right. And Dave, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so the one, in terms of the format, I think, those others that have some kind of grouping attached to them is helpful, as opposed to just the laundry list of them. Kind of helps it. The conciseness, I think, is good. I mean, I like the comments in general about bulleted points. This is kind of bulleted points with numbers, I guess. The one that's stands out, and I think we have almost, very close to exactly the same thing in ours, and that is the student one. So to me, that always needs to be number one. And then the other two, there's something about communication, whether that captures it all. I'm not sure that captures it all quite correctly, but how boards communicate is important. And then the number 8 there, the unity, that's an important concept too, that I think is important to capture. So those would be the 3, I guess.
So on the unity one, Dave, there are a couple of statements in there. I mean, is it how they word it as a whole? Are there any of the statements within 8 that pop out to you as being important? Or is it in its entirety in terms of not just the fact that individual board members don't have authority and can't take unilateral action, but just all, some more details under it too?
Yeah, I would say primarily the first 2 sentences.
Okay.
The fact that, once the board makes a decision, then that has to be the supported view. And then the fact that communication comes on these issues, when requests come to the board for, particularly from the press and so forth, for communication, that it's going through the board president, as the press is always looking to get a story, and the way you get stories is by finding division. And that I don't think serves the district and students the best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So any other thoughts on Riverview before we hop over to Tacoma? All right, let's do that then. Let's hop over, because here's another example of kind of a concise protocol. So Bridget, what were your thoughts? I'm going to pull up my copy here too, but what were your thoughts on Tacoma?
So Tacoma was, of the ones that you provided, was one of those kind of higher picks, because it's March 2022. It's recent integrated current best practices. There's a statement of purpose and commitment. And I love how all is in all caps. That sort of like sends a message how important it is to make sure that all students, right, are being taken care of, right? So evidence, and so once again, just utilize the transformative framework. And so things that were evident in this were the responsiveness, quality in relation to quantity, recognize strengths, valuing differences, inclusiveness, both and thinking, power sharing, strength of vulnerability, collaboration, and everyone, humanistic mindset, the circular thinking, value of emotions, welcoming discomfort, we are enough, know when to go slow, responsiveness. And so, yeah, got it all. So I felt that those did kind of work to incorporate those aspects of transformational relationships.
Super helpful. Thank you. And if we were to pull out some really strong examples from this one, are there any? But I totally highlighted the all in caps. Love that. And
yeah, I would say that one would be the really important one that really was meaningful. And also the mission, or I guess vision statement, maybe whatever that statement is in the beginning, was really powerful.
Wonderful. So let me put that down. Great, thank you. And then I think I wanted to, Edna. Oh, you're muted, Edna. Thanks so much.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
I too appreciated the all being capitalized in the number one. The other things that stood out to me, that the board will lead by example. We agree to avoid words and actions that create a negative impression on an individual, of the board, or the district, and that we encourage debate and differing points of view, but we will do it with care and respect. I really appreciated that. And then I liked the fact that they promoted communication between staff and the board. And then number 10 was the board will speak to the issues on the agenda, not engage in an inappropriate debate. I thought it was a very well-written document, and I was impressed with it.
Wonderful, thank you. And just to back up an earlier point that Flip made on number 4 about communications between staff and board are encouraged, the fact that the requests of staff are directed to the superintendent, that was something he had pointed out from Kelso's, I'm pretty sure. That is super important to, first of all, keep things streamlined, right? And I just wanted to make sure we captured that second sentence as well as the first in number 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. So now let's also look at Auburn's. So yeah, let's start with Carly, and then Jan, we're going to talk about Auburn's. Go ahead. All right, Carly. Oh, you know what, Carly? You're unmuted. I don't know if we can hear you, though. It's a little odd.
Yeah, audio wasn't coming through.
Yeah.
Is it now?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, weird. Okay,
Weird.
so, well, I'm glad you didn't hear my rambling about that anyway. So the first paragraph there are 2 sentences that I highlighted. One is the board members shall promote a positive working culture that meets the educational needs of all students. So particularly that word culture, I think is really important. And then do hereby commit ourselves collectively and individually. So that idea of, it is both a responsibility as an individual and a collective board to do the work, to learn, to grow, whatever we fill in there. But I just really like that piece of individual and collective. As far as like a few other positive points under the authority, the last sentence there, board members dedicate their time to studying and understanding the issues of the district through significant subcommittee work. We don't have committees. That's something we kind of started to talk, or at least board committees or board, whatever. We kind of started to talk about that. I think it came up at our last work session. But I think really the point about dedicating time to studying and understanding, I think is really important, because how can we make decisions about the district if we don't have a full, good, broad understanding of the issues that are actually impacting our district. And then the other one that really stuck out to me, however, I would say I'd probably combine the one from Tacoma and this one with the idea of lifelong learning. So board members shall model lifelong learning and participate in opportunities that provide professional growth. And I think in kind of combination with the board commits itself to continuous improvement through whatever way that looks like. I'm not necessarily sure that a board retreat is the only way that we should be committing to individual or improvement. And then again, kind of goes back to that initial idea of individual continuous improvement as well as a collective board improvement. Those are the things that really stuck out to me.
Wonderful, Carly. Thank you so much. Collective. Great, thank you. And Jan, what were your thoughts on this one?
Can you imagine what it's going to be like when we don't have to look for the unmute button before we talk?
It does save a bit of time. It does save a bit of time. Yeah.
Once again, this one was harder for me to read. If these had been in bullet points, I think it would have looked very much like the Tacoma or the Kelso one. I think a lot of it says the same things. The only thing I would probably add to what Carly has said, because I underlined a lot of what she said, is also under the communication, and maybe you said this, Carly, but I missed it, about building the relationship, building trust, and enabling open communications between each other. That's why we've been striving to have this retreat, this time to get to know one another better. And I think that the pandemic has just not helped with that. And so we've had to work harder at that. But I think that's important. And so that's what I would pull specifically out of this one.
Great, Jan, thank you. And I think it was just the two of you on Auburn. All right, great. So now we're just going to wrap up with North Shore. So Dave, this one was longer, but any thoughts on North Shores?
Yeah, so I'd like to, again, having some kind of grouping, I think is helpful. It's this is another one. There's a lot of words, probably a few less words would be good. And the others, some of the others, had this kind of preamble to it. So this one didn't have a preamble, and so I think some form of preamble to it is helpful. They kind of have the all students one buried under decision making number 9, and to me that one needs to be kind of at the top of the list. This one's a little more, I think, procedural oriented. I mean, a lot of the concepts in here are good. I mean, they're similar to a lot of the other ones. It's just, I would say the format is not, I guess, the one that I would pick the best.
Thanks so much, Dave. Appreciate that. And Flip, I believe you are gonna wrap us up here. You also looked at North Shores, didn't you?
I did. Again, I think there are a lot of similar actual things. I mean, this one's numbered as opposed to bullet pointed. I also do appreciate kind of the categorization, which I think is fine. I would probably, if I was looking at it, I might, since this one's about operating protocols, I mean, I might just put different items about I'd probably put like the continuous improvement more up at the top, get to some of the more philosophical pieces about what, as a couple other board members have mentioned, like that lifelong learner, that putting students first. It's part of that is what a learning organization is like. So putting the learning part up front and then probably putting the procedural stuff more at the bottom. But I do appreciate that categorization because I think it kind of breaks it in there. So if somebody's wondering, well, what are they, what are the thoughts about decision making? You can just kind of jump to it. But in doing, I mean, this is all purely just formatting for me. In doing that, I mean, I'd probably either just put bullets or renumber within each category, rather than this like continuous numbering all the way through. So even though it's categorized, like it doesn't start over, it's just like the whole list of 25 different things and then it's broken up by category. But that's, I mean, that's what I would do. But ours is, we have a top to bottom too, but we don't break it up by categories. That's just the formatting. That the individual pieces and everything, I think, are touched on in most of the other ones as well. So there's probably nothing new that other people haven't brought up previously, but just thinking about the formatting, how easy it is to digest it. And I don't know if doing that, this was spoken about before, about how when we review this annually, I don't know if that means we put the latest date, even if we don't update it, that it's been reviewed. So down at the bottom, it would reflect last reviewed on in 2022. Because otherwise it does look like you haven't touched it in 6 years. So something that just notes that we do review it, we have spoken about it, even if we haven't modified anything. I think that might just send a signal if anyone who's going through those actually knows that it's been looked at, reviewed, discussed, whatever it may be.
That's a good point. And something I was going to bring up later, but this is not a bad time. You'll probably notice some of them, like literally the North Shore one says board policy. Some of them are procedures under policy. Some of them, I think it was Tacoma's, I took off, it's listed on their board page on their website. Auburn's, I think, is within like the opening page of their board docs. Where you have it live, for yours, that's something to think about. Do you want to, if you put it into policy or procedure, it goes into your regular evaluation system that you have for policies and procedures. So that can be helpful to, and if you have it front and center on the website, similar idea, it has a lot of visibility. And so it would be an easy way, not only to communicate it to the public and yourselves, but also as a reminder to annually review it. So just something to think about is where you want it to live within the Tukwila system. So what I'm going to suggest, because now what we're going to do, I think it's a good time to take a 10-minute break. We'll go, I'm going to grab a glass of water. So we'll take a 10-minute break. I'm going to stop sharing here for a sec. And then we will come back and we're going to, I have your operating principles in a Word doc, and we're going to start doing some edits. Okay, so, but let's come back here at 10:50 and we'll get ready to do that work. Sound good? All right, see you in 10 minutes.
I'm going to pause the recording as well.
Somebody just delivered this shirt to me. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, that was pretty funny.
My folks here have a weird sense of humor. And they also know I love bacon.
Too funny. Well, I think next time we have to plan this off-site and, in the sunshine with Carly. I think that would be lovely.
I would certainly support going down to Costa Rica for a meeting.
I think I have to find a way to help make that work. I'm sure Carly and her wife would love us for company. Come do a work session down there with you.
Yeah, come on.
Let's go.
Board meeting too, so.
That'd be great. Okay, everyone doing well? Now we're gonna be doing a lot more thinking here now. So I'm going to share the screen. So what I've done is I've put the latest version, Deb helped me find this, the latest version of the Tequila operating principles. And so there's a way I think we can go about editing this together. So, if you have a copy of it, I can scroll through here really quick. But just first of all, from a formatting perspective, you see no categories and no bullets. So that would be something to think about. So I have two thoughts of how to go first is obviously, I think we need to think about which categories to add and then reorganize what exists, and then we can edit what exists. But there's also the introductory paragraph. I found it really interesting how y'all honed in on having kind of a mission statement opening paragraph. And so I think it'd be nice to start there, and then we'll think about categories. So let's take 2-3 minutes and look at that, pull up some other examples from the other language that resonated with you. And I'm going to turn on the revision tracking tool, right? And we're going to do some group editing here. Okay, so think about what you might like to change. Yes. It was Auburn's intro that seemed to resonate with people.
I also liked Tacoma's beginning
Right.
paragraph.
Tacoma's and Kelso had one too that I ended up highlighting. So let's talk about what aspects of those other intro paragraphs we like, and then I'll think about how to weave them in. So I'm going to, you don't get to see it because we're going to focus on the Word document, but I'm going back to the inclusive discussion protocol, the 1 through 6. And I'm going to start in the middle this time, but we're still going to go numerical just to kind of keep it a little simpler since you can't see it. So Bridget, I'm going to start with you in the middle here. So what aspects of either the other introductory paragraphs you might like to add, or any aspects around here you might think we should improve upon?
I'm still in the process of pulling it up, so I need a
No.
second.
No worries.
Maybe somebody else would like to go first.
We can absolutely do that. All right. So let's go. So Carly, you had focused on some other introductory paragraphs. What elements might you see, or we keep this one? Maybe the point is not to change what we have here, but is there anything about this you would want to change?
Just to potentially add, the thing that I appreciated about the Auburn one was the sentence on culture, and I actually rewrote it a little bit. So here's what I might present. So board members shall promote and practice a supportive working culture that centers the needs of all students. I basically just added the word practice because I think that's important because it is a practice. Yes. And then the word center for students rather than, I think it just says meets the needs of students. And then the other one from, I think, the other document that I appreciated was the collective and individual, but that's actually already in the statement here.
It is. Now, do hereby publicly commit ourselves collectively and individually to following the operating principles. That wasn't quite the same sentiment that we had focused on. Although Kelso, that's how Kelso's intro paragraph is worded. Let's see here.
And then the other one was in Auburn, which is same sentiment. I hereby commit ourselves collectively and individually to the following operating protocol. And maybe the intro is not the place for that sentence. Maybe that sentence falls down in accountability or in continuous improvement or somewhere else.
So thank you, first of all. Thank you very much. And I feel like through Zoom land, I can see Bridget still thinking, because I'm going to go back to you, Bridget, for a second. But I do want to, no, I have another thought, but I'm going to wait. So Bridget, since I had asked you to start thinking, let's get your thoughts.
So from Tacoma, for the purpose, so it actually sort of it gives a purpose of this, right? So for the purpose of enhancing teamwork among members of the board and between the board and the administration, which I think is, we, the members of the school board, do hereby publicly commit ourselves collectively and individually to the following operating protocols.
There you go. So the only difference I saw was taking out members and putting in board, which might be a little bit more intuitive for people to read. So thank you for that. So now I'm going to go through and make sure we get thoughts from anything else to add?
I thought what I heard, just to clarify, the
thank you.
Word of that sentence, Director of Poet Writer said protocols, and in here we have principles. And I just want to clarify if that was an intentional change that Director of Poet Writer was bringing.
Yeah.
It's a very relevant point.
Yeah.
A lot of boards call these protocols instead of principles.
I would be open to discussion on it.
So let's have you kick off the thinking then, if we could, Bridget. So the difference between a principle and a protocol.
Sure.
Yeah, what could be some thinking here?
So I'm thinking about too, like in tribal communities, protocols are the very clear actions that, you know, the way things occur in the order, or, you know, so when protocol is discussed, it's very much about what happens. And then when I think about principles, it's more of a theoretical framework. That's what I'm familiar with. Whenever I hear principles, it's usually attached to some type of theoretical framework. And that's about all I have on those two words.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to keep going around. Let's talk about this protocol to principle. So after, I'm going to keep starting on my number list with Bridget, and after Bridget is Edna. So Edna, protocol versus principle. I mean, does one fit better than the other for you?
I like the word protocol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like it better.
There you go. It seems to fit better for you.
Yes.
And Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, so to me, they're kind of two different concepts. So, and when I look at this document, we kind of have both in there. So we have some procedures, protocols, ways of doing business, and then, but we also have some more philosophical statements about, I think Bridget talked about it as a framework, high kind of more abstract level thinking. So I would, I think that could be a grouping for this, to take the ones that are, more philosophy oriented and put them into one group, and then the ones that are more, meeting protocol-ish, put them in another group.
Is it possible to use both terms?
It is possible to use both terms. You know, I'm looking through the examples to see what other titles of this documents, policy, procedure, agreement, right? Like different districts have called it different things to have just for a title perspective, and then using the protocol and the principle idea to start categorizing. Is it, you know, and also that reminds me of the point you had earlier, Dave, about how the North Shore's protocols are organized, that the value statements around supporting all students is way down at the bottom instead of at the top, right? There is strength in how you prioritize principles and protocols for sure.
Yeah, so Auburn has a category called meeting conduct, which could be some things in there.
I'll start writing down categories. So meeting conduct.
Yeah, North Shore has the category called board meetings, but they have, I don't know, to me, they have that at the top, and to me, that's more at the bottom. You put the philosophical stuff at the top, and then.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to go around again just to make sure we get everyone's thoughts on this. Let's keep building. I just want to make sure we hear from everyone once, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So Flip, Dr. Herndon, do you have, based on your experience, right, with working with these in other districts too, you know, in terms of what the title is, do you have any thoughts?
So as I'm thinking about this and the way we have the rest of the kind of board policies and procedures, it seems like you could have this as either this is the principles document, which is kind of the policy maybe, and then the actual procedures are a procedure that accompanies it, as you've seen in some of the other ones. Like they have a procedure number that goes with it, but the only challenge I have with that is sometimes by separating the two, people see one and not the other. So there are times where people are like, well, I don't know what the procedure is. But procedures typically are outlining the actual actions, and usually the policies are like the overarching themes. So I think of, again, like mission and vision statements and strategic, you know, direction versus strategic plan. I think for this one, you know, as we're looking at it, it could either go the way that Director Larson was just talking about, where within this one document, you could talk about these are the principles and these are the procedures or the protocols that we have, so that it's in one place so that people can see both of them in one document. So I think either way that happens would be good, but I also agree that this is a mix of both of those things. It's both principles and protocols.
You know, maybe an overarching title for this would just be an operating agreement. Might be a thought. But I want to make sure we capture everyone's. And so we're going back to the top, Carly. What do you think?
Yeah, not much more to add. I like the idea. I think having it on one document, I think would be really useful, not only for the community, but for myself. Because I think to Dr. Herndon's point, like oftentimes folks will look at one or not the other. So having on both here is great. I like the idea. One word that I might offer is guiding principles. Because we're thinking about what are the principles, like what those are. Those are things that help guide how we operate. So guiding principles and operating procedures, if we try to categorize them.
Okay, so and your audio got quiet on us, so I just want to make sure we heard you correctly. So you were talking about maybe calling it an overarching operating agreement, but then have guiding principles and protocols as two main categories. Did I get that? Great. And then Jan, what do you think?
Yeah, I really like the language of agreement because it sounds like it's something that we own rather than something that's put on us. Yeah, so I would go with operating agreement, or if it becomes policies, principles, procedures, it kind of goes into a different category. that lives in that category forever.
Mm.
I don't know. That's my thought.
No, that's a helpful thought. Thank you. Right, because you do want to be careful you don't categorize yourself to distraction. Right. Yeah. It's helpful to group things, but again, you don't want to worship the written word so much that you've like pigeonholed every idea. Right. So let's think about, yeah.
You're coming back around to the opening paragraph on all of it?
I am. In fact, I was just going to segue. So let's talk about the opening paragraph, because of course, like this operating principles phrase would need some revision. But yes, let's come back to the opening paragraph, Jan, and then I want to make sure we get Carly's thoughts. Although we did get Carly's thoughts, but not yours yet, Jan.
Like I said before, I know this is for us.
Mhm.
This is to remind us of who we are and how we're operating together. I would still suggest that we put language in as elected or as representative or as, elected representatives of the community. And I would also want to put community in there as that we're not only between the board and the administration, but we are I think we're representatives of staff and students also. So we've had that debate several times, and what I've liked in a lot of these other ones we've looked at is it's been clear that if there's a complaint, yes, it goes to the superintendent, but we are in relation with everyone in the area, including staff, community, all of those things. So I would make sure that that's in there.
Well, and I that's a great point and something to think about in terms of where to put that. There is the first line talking about teamwork amongst the governance team, right? The board and the superintendent specifically, that administration word is used in here. But in terms of being responsive and responsible to the community is a very, very strong sentiment for sure. But it's kind of two different concepts, if you get my point. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
So kind of going back to from the top, between the board and the administration, let's see here, among members of the board and between board and the administration, we members. Yeah, so would we also need to have agreement from the community as well? Then are we talking beyond the school district here? And would we need to have an agreement beyond the school district?
That's true. When you're talking about agreements amongst parties, both parties do have to, you can't presume agreement from the other party, correct? And so that would imply a procedure to do that.
Yeah, so, because folks, like if there's folks that are, in elections, right? So if they're voting, do we need to have an agreement amongst folks who voted? And is that outside of the school district, right?
Yeah, so again, to clarify who the agreements among, as well as opposed, or also considering responsibilities and responsiveness to, and in service of, in partnership with, right? Different types of relationships. So let's think about this, maybe a way to help clarify this is if you're titling an agreement, it is, again, a very deliberate act for the parties to agree to the agreement. So, limiting the scope of that would make some sense about, and it also helps define exactly what we're going to include in it. If you're talking about agreements between the board and the larger community, there's other policies for that, other practices to cover that. This is meant to talk about the how of the work of the governance team. So the good news is this is not the only policy that the Tukwila team uses in its work, right? So there can definitely be partnership agreements, you know, the community framework. I'm trying to help alleviate the pressure of trying to think you have to get every single thing into this operating agreement.
I'm fine if people don't think that phrase should be in there. I felt like it gave us the broader base of who we are, but it doesn't need to be there if folks feel like it's someplace else.
But do you feel it needs to be included someplace?
Mm.
I might feel that way, but I'm not sure that feel that strongly that I need to convince anyone else if they don't feel that way. So that's okay.
Well, and let's think about it perhaps under the general, I hate to use the word category this early, of principles, in terms of principles and protocols, rights, philosophy and action. I think it's a good one to kind of park and think about where it might fit.
I think it.
So we can't quite hear you, unfortunately, Carly. Do you want, and don't forget, we can use chat too, if that would be helpful. I'm going to throw out a question here. I don't want to, this is very good dialogue, and I want to leave it open for anyone with thoughts, but I want, again, if we change the title to operating agreement, does anyone have any thoughts in terms of the operating principles within the paragraph itself?
Then we need to change the final word in the paragraph to agreements.
Okay. Let's give that a try. Okay. So I think Carly is typing in chat, but as we are supporting her typing in chat, how is this starting to look to people? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think trying to include all the protocols or whatever related to community engagement in this, yeah, I think that's a whole separate topic which we have and I think should be developed further, but this particular one is focusing on the board and administration, which I think is one of the key ones as well. So I would be, putting those in separate buckets.
Okay.
Amy, are you able to see what Carly put in the chat?
I am. So I'm going to read it for support of people at home. So, and Carly had another point from before the break about there isn't a requirement that they found that it isn't. It's interesting and honestly surprising that this isn't a requirement of school board directors considering how we go to schools about being fingerprinted. So that's something it's right, something to think about. But then I like the idea of having it in there of recognition that we are accountable to the community as elected officials. What if we put the last sentence first and restated it as board members as elected representatives of the community shall promote and practice the needs. Ooh. Members as, let's see if I'm capturing. Elected represent. Come on, here we go. You would think, here we go. Representatives of the community. So putting this first, Carly, correct? Last sentence first and restate, okay. Oh, I'll stick this one out here. Okay. How does that look, Carly? Did I capture it? Okay, what do y'all think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways, have to think about it.
It's good to me.
All right. All right, so let's leave, and again, this is all drafts, right? So let's leave this here for a second. The next thing I think we want to do is think about categories. So, and this is what I'm thinking we're going to do. We're going to come up with categories, and then we're going to take a few minutes, do some work about what is existing and categorize them. Okay, so we talked about principles, protocols. We don't have to stick with those titles, but I want to capture that. Meeting conduct. Those were the ones our guiding principles is what I wrote down. Okay, so any other categories? And we can, of course, not set in stone.
So are you thinking that, yeah, things like communication, accountability, will we put those in those areas?
Yes. And again, these might not be the ultimate titles of the categories, but this will help us reorganize what's existing. Let's see here, some other examples. So sometimes you have roles and responsibilities, which is more that protocol idea. So I think we kind of have that covered, the actual work of the roles and responsibilities of the board superintendent, the board superintendent team relationship is one that might be under principles. So I'm just going to capture them like this. So then,
Carly added continuous improvement.
thank you. Lifelong learning concept, right? Guiding principles would be, I don't know if that's relationships. And then, yeah, sometimes there's an ethics around confidentiality, individual integrity. There's some elements like that. I don't know if we have that here, but that's something to think about. We can make that for a category. Meeting norms, meeting conduct. Just fans of norms, but we'll throw that in there just for, and then communication and information management. And then under roles and responsibilities would be that the unity of control idea, the idea that, the board has authority as a whole. It has a title of unity of control in some of the policies, as opposed to individuals don't have authority. So that would fall under roles and responsibilities here as an example. But any other categories we want to start with? So I'm going to number these because I think this will make it easier as we're going through the existing lines. So I don't know if y'all had the opportunity to print out. It might be easier if you have a hard copy of the Tukwila of your version. But so if you want to take a minute, what I'll do is I'll eventually go through and read them out. If you don't have a hard copy, that'll be fine. But see if you can take a minute and try to categorize the existing ones, and then we'll come back and do it together. I'm going to do it too. Feel free to give a thumbs up when you're ready to start working together on it.
Must be time to quit. My pen just ran out of ink.
Uh-oh. Yeah, let's just do 2 more minutes here. And it's okay if we don't finish them because we'll work on them together. All right, 20 seconds. All right, I'm not being very exact. But again, we don't have to finish because we're going to do this together. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through the list of existing. They were principles, they're now agreements. And then we're going to talk about where to categorize them. So the first one, and then after we categorize them, we're going to go back and think about editing. But I think it'll be easier to edit once they're categorized. So the first one, students' interests come first. Where should we put that? 1, Carly. Yep. All right. Putting that under here. Okay. Number 2, exercise leadership in vision planning, policy making, evaluation, advocacy. Where would you put that? I'm seeing a 1 from Jan. 1 from Edna, kind of a 1 from Carly.
You got a 1 from Flip also.
Okay, got a 2 from Dave. So what are you thinking with 2, Dave?
Oh, because it's separating, not so boards not managing day-to-day operations of the district. So that's separating the distinction between boards and superintendents.
Roles and responsibility point.
Right, right.
What do y'all think about that?
I can follow Dave on this one, although when we edit, I would probably want us to take that last part out.
Well, yeah, see, when we get to editing, that'll be another thing. But Carly, you were trying to say something. I'm sorry we're having audio issues. No, if someone can help me, I also feel like, yeah, someone can help me monitor the chat since I'm monitoring the Word doc. But
Amy,
yeah.
can you explain to me in more precise terms the difference between guiding principles and roles and responsibility?
So a guiding principle, if you would think about it, it's the difference between a mission and vision statements and then a plan to do work. So a guiding principle would be, this is our philosophy, right? This is what we're going to use on a philosophical level, on a mission level to approach our work, where a protocol or role or responsibility, this is the actual work itself, how we're defining the work. So to Dave's point around, this is the board's role, exercising leadership and vision, planning, policy making, evaluation, and advocacy on behalf of students, not the day-to-day operations. That is talking about the actual work, not a principle so much. Believe versus do is the way Jan worded it in chat. Does that help? Okay.
So I just pulled up in our 1000 section board policy 1005 key functions of the board. And so in terms of, what we will, the vision, structure, expectations, accountability, and advocacy. So I'm wondering for exercise leadership and vision planning policy making, if that is part of the key functions. So number 2, protocols, roles, and responsibilities.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at that, Bridget. Thank you. Right, getting to even if it is a protocol, it doesn't feel very actionable. Well, and that is a point, Carly. The idea here sometimes is to define how the interaction between the superintendent and the board. So you do have that, what is it, 1005, policy 1005, that talks about specifically where this as an operating agreement would start to talk about where the overlap sometimes can happen between a board and superintendent in their work. But being clear, because if a board starts creeping into the superintendent work, the day-to-day operations, it can cause some dysfunction, unfortunately. I'm going to put it under 2. And then again, the idea is we're going to come back and edit these. Okay. Okay, providing continuing education opportunities. I think I know where that one goes. So we'll do that one. You know what? And sorry, I'm going to continue to. I'm going to know these will eventually be bullets, but I think it'll be easier as we're editing to have them numbered, just to have them be easier to refer to. Okay, conduct business through a set agenda. 3, yeah. Okay. Provide full disclosure. Each member will provide input, encouragement, express concerns, positions rather than withhold information from other members. When a board member feels there has not been full disclosure, an objective process for revisiting the issue will be used. So to put that one, a 3. Jan's holding up 3, yeah. There's a couple places it could fall, honestly. It's wherever you feel it would be most helpful. It could also fall under communication, information management. Sometimes what can happen with a board is that if a board member goes to the superintendent requesting a piece of information, and then it's not shared, that perhaps, through a weekly briefing or an updated board meeting, if that information isn't shared with the rest of the board, it can cause some communication issues. Sometimes that's what this is about.
Yeah, this seems to be responding to some particular circumstance. I probably would, when we go back to edit, I would probably recommend that we take this one out. I'm not sure that it's telling us. I don't know.
It might not be something that you want to retain. I'm going to put it under communication and information management for now. Yeah. Because that's true. Don't think just because we're categorizing these that we need to keep them, and my numbering is not working, that we need to keep them exactly the same. But this will just help us organize our thinking. So maintain an open environment where each member is empowered to freely express opinions, concerns, questions, and ideas in board meetings in a civil manner. So Carly's suggesting 4.
I can't see your categories.
Okay, let me go back up to categories.
There we go.
Let me see if I can expand this a little bit. If I zoom out, it will help us see more. Let me know if that's too small, though. I was worried that was going to be too small.
Yeah, I go 4.
4. Okay, that's where I'm going to put it. Okay. Keep an open mind. And this is an interesting one. This one I thought might have some history to it too that I probably don't know, but keep an open mind and accept that board members can change their opinions based on new or additional information. Recognize they're not. So continuous lifelong learning. There you go. Yeah, that makes some sense. Okay. Making decision on information, not on personalities. Let's see, look, yeah, interim superintendent. This is an older document, isn't it? Based on expectations of full disclosure by superintendent staff, board members will strive to make best decisions at the time. So making decisions on information, not on personalities. Maybe meeting conduct is what Jan's suggesting. Anyone have any thoughts on that one? That is an interesting one. We can put it in 3 for now. Again, this is very much a first draft. So we're going to put this one in 3. Okay, I'm going to delete some of these to try to zoom up. That will be helpful. Okay. Debate issues, not one another. Board will engage in critical thinking, expecting all board members to freely offer differing views as part of the discussion prior to making a decision. So let's go back to categories. Yeah, so maybe communication, maybe, right? Communication, information management, maybe meeting conduct. Okay, so do we have a 3 or do we have a 4 on debating the issues, not one another? 3, all right, 3 seems to be consensus. Okay, here we go. Individual board member will not take unilateral action. This is the unity of control. So the idea that the board has authority as a group, not as individuals. Let's go back up here. So Carly for 2. So protocols for roles and responsibilities. Dave's holding up a 2. We're getting 2s. Okay, let's do that. Thank you for being patient with the scrolling, by the way. This is tricky. Okay.
I particularly like the Christmas theme.
I know the word. I don't know. You're being very patient with the abstract numbering system. That makes no sense too. Reach decisions by consensus, and that individual members will publicly abide by those decisions. So that could be meeting conduct agreement. That could be guiding principle. Not so much guiding principle. Seems like we have a primary guiding principle, which is actually kind of lovely. So the idea that, again, let's go back to it.
It's interesting. We have not used consensus.
Haven't used consensus, right? But this idea that individual members will publicly abide by decisions of the board.
Right.
That's a common thread within protocols. So that could be, I'm going to suggest meeting either roles and responsibilities or meeting conduct. Dave is saying 3, got a 2 from Jan. It's 2 from Edna. Let's see here.
It could also go under accountability.
It could go under accountability. I think that was, we were thinking accountability to the public, perhaps. So if this is about how the board makes decisions and then abides by the final vote, I'm going to put it under 3. Okay, attending meetings well prepared. So this might be a role and responsibility. So discussing items on the agenda, being prepared to make decisions and striving for efficient decision making. So that could be either roles and responsibilities or meeting conduct. I've seen a 3 from Dave. Okay, I'm gonna put it up in there. Okay, strive to have no surprises for the board or superintendent. So that could be, so no surprises, could be communication and information management. What do you think? 4? Following the chain of command and encouraging others to do the same. That word direct is interesting. So following the chain of command, personnel complaints and concerns should be directed to the superintendent. Two, roles and responsibilities. That makes sense. And then review and revise operating principles as needed as part of the board self-evaluation. So that one, continuous improvement, perhaps. All
And,
right.
and does the last word in that sentence need to be changed to agreements instead of principles?
Yes, we can do that one right off the top. Good idea. Okay. Okay. So now I can zoom in a little bit more to make it easier for you to read. Let's go back. This is a funny color scheme for sure. So now, do we have to take a sec? How are the brains functioning? We've been in this over 2.5 hours. Are we still doing all right? I would like to take a first cut at the language. We're not going to be able to polish this today. We don't have time, but that's probably good. It's good to reflect on this over time, actually. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
The ones that we highlighted from other boards, from other policies or procedures, whatever they are, how will we bring those in?
That is the perfect question. Thank you for that segue. So this is the time when we will look at that language, and if there's language we like from other principles on that topic, this is when we bring it in. Exactly this time. Okay. And then again, what I'm going to do is clean this up, send it to you all, and then again with some further study. It is hard to edit a document by committee, right? It can be really taxing, but I just want to, make sure we do a first cut together, and then we can go back, look at language, right? And bring it back up again. And this is something, if you want to do in, if you have a study session after a board meeting, this is kind of hard to do from the dais, this work, but the dais in a board meeting. But if you want to do it outside your Saturday time together, you absolutely could. I'm hoping to give you enough foundation that you'll be able to edit and refine from here. I'm of course happy to help you on a Saturday, but I don't want to limit you time-wise to that. Okay. So, excuse me. So shall we leave the opening paragraph for now and look at the language that we just reorganized? Is that okay? Okay. So let's look at this. This is under guiding principles. This is something that we highlighted in almost all other examples. So let's take a look. We had a capitalized all that seemed to really resonate. Let's take a look at some other options here and see if we want to edit this one.
Tacoma's was worded very precisely, just with the board will represent the needs and interests of all the children in the district.
Yeah, I'm going to grab that one too.
All capitalized, yeah.
Right. Shall I put in Tacoma's language here? What do y'all think of that? All right, let me type it in. Needs an interest. See, I did have a typo. Let's make that plural too. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to look at the notes from when we talked about.
I really like the first bullet point under in Kelso's about leading by example. That seems like a guiding principle.
Yeah, that is a good idea. We do have let me just stick on this one really quick for a second,
okay.
Jan. So the word represents this, considering we aren't quite representative of the community. So the board will represent the needs and interests of all children. So what other word? So that represent word can mean several different things. That's a good point, Carly. What other word do you think might be more precise?
Advocate?
Right? It could be more than one, because advocate is one. I'm gonna take some notes here. This might be something to be chewed on. Advocates, serve might be one.
There's a question in use of a word, it looks like, from Carly, wondering the word represent, does this mean to speak for or truly represent? Considering we aren't quite representative of, elevate voices of.
Elevate voices of? Let's put that down. Any other thoughts? And we can have, we probably don't want a laundry list, but we could have more than one concept here. In terms of this is the guiding principle. Trying to keep an eye on chat too. Be responsible for. Maybe this is where the accountability comes into. Any other thoughts?
We could, use more than one term too when
We
it
can.
comes to fine tuning it, like advocate for and advocate and be responsible for. But then I like the word elevate.
Right? I know. Well, we can have more than, maybe the idea is to have more than one sentence. Instead of making a run-on sentence, maybe make more than one sentence. I'm going to make a note here. This might be something to chew on.
I do like the word advocate, just
Mhm.
partly because it's consistent with, our policy 1005, which talks about advocacy as being one of the key functions of the board.
For sure. Okay. All right, that's definitely one to come back to. Let's leave that there for a second. What was the second guiding principles you had picked up on, Jan, that we had noted in other policies?
The board will lead by example. It goes on to say the manner in which the board and superintendent conduct their business will be a model throughout the district for students, teachers, parents, and staff on how problems are solved.
There you go. It's Tacoma's number 2, right?
Kelso's
Oh,
number 1.
Kelso's number 1. Thank you. I'm gonna put that in here. I'll add that in when I come back and clean up.
And I'm not wedded to that whole example. I just wanted to get that thought in there.
Mhm. All right, now we'll go back and type that up. Any other highlighted pieces from other protocols that might be under guiding principles? Let me just look really quick here. Open environment. So there were a lot that you all highlighted in terms of how it was beyond a communication. It was that question around deliberation, debates, how that work is done. I'm trying to find a concise example that we highlighted. Where was Auburn's? There was one we highlighted from Auburn under communication. Each board member shall focus on building trust and enabling open communications with each other. Yeah, there were several from Kelso we highlighted, actually.
Yeah, again on Kelso, the second from the bottom.
That's the one I was thinking of. Thank you. So this one, the board and superintendent will work to minimize misunderstandings and reduce conflict by supporting each other constructively and courteously, maintaining confidentiality, focusing discussion on issues, not personalities, encourage constructive disagreement. So would that be a guiding principle or a communication point? I'm taking in your note here, Kelly. I wish we, oh, Carly, yeah, we still can't hear you, unfortunately. I'm so sorry. I know. I'm so
I think
sorry.
he has in the chat principle for that last one.
Okay.
We miss your
Oh,
input, Carly.
yeah. Okay. So let's put this. So I'm going to do that. So this is part of my notes here. Kelso, second from the bottom, we'll put it in principles.
Carly, do you want to try jumping off and on to see if your mic gets re-triggered?
That's a good idea. Okay. I think Tacoma's here too. All right, and yeah, any other principles we want to capture here? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Oh, wait, no, go ahead, Edna. Did you have something? I think you're muted.
I'm looking at Tacoma's number 10. The board will speak to the issues on the agenda, not engage in inappropriate debate.
How about meeting conduct for that one?
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, let's capture that. Thank you. Thank you.
I think
Okay.
a couple of us highlighted the number 4 on Tacoma also. Communication between staff and board are encouraged. And then board requests of staff are to be directed to the superintendent.
Mhm.
And that's probably a role and responsibility maybe, or communication, I'm not sure.
I'm going to put it under communication for now,
Okay.
and then we can always move it. So that is Tacoma's number 4, right? Yes.
Yes.
Amy, I don't know if you've already captured the number 2 in Kelso. The board will be open, honest, and tactful. Did we get that somewhere
We
on?
didn't. And that we might be able to incorporate that into this one here about the board leading by example.
Okay,
Let me make a note of that. Plus, that's Kelso's number 2, right? Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And if we find more guiding principles, we'll certainly put them in there. What I'd like to do, here comes Carly. What I'd like to do is look under number 2. Okay, let's see how that worked.
Testing, testing, testing. Wow. All right, should have done that a long time ago. Thanks, Bridget.
Bridget with the eureka moment. Yay. Thank you. Okay, so now what we're going to do, let's look under the protocols, roles, and responsibilities. And again, if there are any here that just seem off, let's highlight them. Even if we don't completely strike them now, or we want to go back and do a serious edit, I want to leave that open as a possibility. So these 3 that we categorized in the protocols, any thoughts?
I would want to revise the second one and put it in positive language.
Asset-based instead.
Yeah.
I feel the same about number 1. Like I'd rather say that not managing day to day. Like I'd rather say who manages the day to day.
Right. Okay. And are there any other examples from the other policies we can think of that we'd want to put in here?
In the third one, let's just make sure that Flip knows that he's permanent and not.
We can strike that interim, can't we? There we go. Okay. Any other thoughts? Again, very much the rough draft. So I just want to make sure we have time to cover all the categories before it hits noon. So let's go down these one by one. We have a lot of meeting conduct. So conducting business through a set agenda. Okay. Making decisions on information, not on personalities. Oh, here's another interim. I'm getting rid of that.
Personally, I just think that one's a little bit long, so I think it could be just like more concise, maybe.
And is it covered in the next one?
It might be redundant.
Actually, in the Kelso one, there's a pretty concise bullet point that says members and support each of the encouraging and focus on issues.
Let's find that one. Oh, it's the last one, right? In Kelso?
The very last bullet point.
Very
on
last
Kelso.
one. Okay. Okay. Do we know, do we have to check and make sure this board policy is still relevant to this point? Or maybe it's redundant. If this is in board policy 1220, maybe we don't need it here.
Yeah, we didn't see that in anybody else's. So the fact that it's in policy may not need to be in agreement.
Okay. I'm going to do that. All right. Any other thoughts under meeting conduct?
The board will consider research, best practice, public input, and financial impacts in their decision making.
Ooh, where is that one from again?
Tacoma number 8.
All right, Tacoma number 10. And
There's also one here. Study sessions will be for in-depth discussion on 1 or 2 agreed upon topics.
which one's
We
that
have
one?
number 11.
Do you have a policy on meetings? Just to make sure it's not redundant, because sometimes boards do, sometimes they don't. Okay. All right, any other thoughts on meeting conduct? Okay.
Sorry, I do have one more. I wonder if we're acting like, if the courageous conversations norms are guiding norms. I feel like that should also be in here. So like, there was also something somewhere about being bold. Oh no, that's because I looked up earlier when Edna asked about the definition of courageous conversations, I actually looked it up, and it said something about boldness. I can look it up again and put it in, but I think that could be valuable to have. Because again, if we want that to be our agreement and understanding as a team.
Yeah, so I'm going to put this in. Maybe you can help with this, following your, your practice of having them at the beginning of every meeting. We have it. That might actually be a principle too.
I was just thinking about that because we do have the kind of welcoming that talks about the expectations for the meeting. I think it would be good to reflect some of that in this somewhere, which is some of those pieces about, experiencing discomfort, not getting closure on some things. I don't know how we want to integrate that, but since we do highlight that at the beginning of each of our meetings.
Great point.
So we could state courageous conversation norms and then a hyphen and then just list what the norms are.
Well, and how they're to be used, if that's helpful, right? And back to Edna's question, understanding exactly what is meant by courageous conversation norms and then how they're to be applied to your work. Okay. Is this good for meeting conduct? Okay, we have 3 minutes. I'm trying to be respectful of your time here. So let's look at communication and information management. Okay. Any other interims? There is an interim. So I'm going to take that one out.
Audience participation protocol will be consistently practiced.
So this, no, I don't know if there's a couple other examples of this, the idea about sharing information with the full board. Let's see if there's anything else we highlighted. Or any other communication points.
On the Kelso one, the second from the bottom, did we incorporate that somewhere?
So I feel like we did.
I did, yeah.
Right. Yes,
That's
up here as a guiding principle.
Okay, that's right.
I'm glad we double checked though. Well, and then in Kelso, there's the fourth one that we highlighted. The board encouraged communications from community, parents, staff, and students. So that might be a little broader than what you just mentioned, Bridget. So I'm just going to put that down here really quick. Uh-oh. No. Okay.
On the second one under that, maintaining an open environment, I like the core of what's that's saying. I think I have a little bit of rub with the civil manner words there, and either think that we need to have clarity as a board about what that means, or just define it a little bit better, because civility is very subjective.
Or we could actually incorporate the transformative relationships in education.
For sure. Yeah, let me reference that here. RPF. If I do TRPF, will we know what we're talking about? Hopefully, right? To pull out language from there. CTR, not TF. There we go. All right. All right. It's 12 o'clock noon. Do we have time to go through the last two really quick? Because accountability is empty. This might be an opportunity to write something yourselves. You know what, and so if we were to capture just some quick ideas of what topics you'd like to cover here under accountability.
I think a little bit what comes up for, oh, sorry.
No, go, no.
Okay, is I think going back to the conversation we had even in the intro about like being accountable and responsive to or responsible to the community. But then again, I think it could be like saying what that exactly looks like is how we flesh it out, but
Just to capture that idea, right? Any other thoughts there we'd want to capture?
I think we'd want to be accountable to review this document, but also work accountable to the strategic plan.
I think accountability around the key functions of the board. So kind of going back to policy 1005. And I'm going to have to leave because I have to drive my son to work. And so I don't know how much more, or if I'm also kind of just wanting to be careful around the sense of urgency.
Well, and there is no sense of urgency. It's better to do this well than to do it fast, right? So what I'm going to do right before you leave is I will clean this up and send it to y'all, and then you can have a conversation about when you'd like to come back together. And it'll give you a chance to really kick it around, come up with some of the language, then we'll come back together, or you will come back together. Sometimes it helps to have a board member who doesn't mind leading the process and being in control of the edits, like just to take that responsibility because it helps the process move along faster. But it is 12:02 and you all have been working very hard. And Carly's on vacation. So I'm going to stop this share real quick. Thank you all for coming together and investing this time again. Anyone have any last thoughts before before our chair might prompt us to adjourn?
Enjoy your vacation, Carly.
well,
I like the idea of having a board member be responsible for edits. So if there's anyone that would be interested in that.
I'm happy to support with that.
Okay. So, and maybe, thank you, Amy, for the facilitation. And I think that once we have a chance to take another look at the document, I'm a visual learner, so it's nice to have something paper in front for me to learn, be able to review it. And then what we could do is, as part of our agenda setting, be able to look at another opportunity to, if it be a work session or whatnot, to be able to come back to these. So we will revisit it. And I would like to be able to do it, in the next month or so.
That sounds great. You did a lot of good work today. Thank you for staying focused and engaged. It was really helpful, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to adjournment.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You.
Bye, everybody.